Hey, we're nearing the end of our equations unit, and one of the last things that we need to be able to do is we need to be able to handle equations that use what's called the distributive property. Now, the distributive property really just refers to problems where we have things like these, where there's parentheses, and you see a number out here in front of the parentheses, and what that means is we're going to be multiplying the number on the outside to all of the different things that we see on the inside. In this case, we only see two different things on the inside of the parentheses. We see an x and a plus 3. And this means that there's a 6 on the outside. That 6 is going to multiply by the x. And then the 6 is also going to multiply by the 3. A number that's on the outside is only going to multiply things that are on the inside. And 6 times x happens to be 6x, nice and simple, plus, and then we have 6 times 3, which is 18, and altogether that still equals 48. We don't need to multiply this by 6, it's not in the parentheses. And now we just have a two-step equation that we can solve. We just do the add, subtract step first, and that's going to give us 6x equals 30, and then we divide by 6. And that's going to give us our solution, x equals 5. And remember that the solution is the value that makes it true. And if I came back into this original equation, and instead of an x, I had 6 times 5 plus 3, well, 5 plus 3 is 8, and 6 times 8 is 48, and that would make it true. Let's come over to this second problem. We're going to do what's called distribute the 4. On this last problem, we distributed the 6. And this time we're going to distribute a 4. And so we're going to distribute the 4 to the 5, and that means 4 times 5, which is 20. And then we distribute the 4 times the x. And notice there's a minus sign in there, so we'll go ahead and put that minus sign right there. And then 4 times x is 4x. And altogether that equals 8. And we're going to go ahead and solve it. We'll do the add and subtract step first. You know, we don't touch the x. We're going to come over here to the 20. Let's get rid of the 20. We'll take it away, and 8 take away 20 happens to be a negative 12. And over here is still negative 4x. Don't drop the negative sign. And then last but not least, we'll divide. We'll divide that last step. I don't know why I just wrote a 3 there. We'll divide both sides by a negative 4. Negative 4s go away. They turn to 1. And you end up with a solution of x equals 3. Guess I could have come back over here and boxed my answer for x equals 5. And if I put a 3 in there, you can kind of do this mentally too. 5 take away 3. There's 5 take away 3. That's 2. And 4 times 2 happens to be 8. So you're good to go. Here's an example of a problem where we still have distributive property, but you see this plus 3 out there. And when we distribute, that is not going to get multiplied by a 7. 7 only multiplies by things in the parentheses. So we'll multiply 7 times x. That's 7x. And then we'll multiply 7 times 2. That's 14. And then we got a plus 3. And that together equals 73. We have a new concept here, which is called combine like terms. We need to combine those two terms because they are both numbers. 14 and 3 make 17. And after we're done distributing the 7 and then combining our like terms, now it's just a matter of solving a two-step equation. And we'll take away 17 on both sides. And because we always, again, do the add subtract first, 7x equals 56. And divide by 7. And we get our solution, x equals 8. And if you put an 8 in here, for x, 8 plus 2 is 10. And 7 times 10, because there's your 7. 7 times 10 is 70. Plus this 3 is 73, which makes it a true statement. That's why that's your solution. Hey, I want to do one more of the examples from that lesson. It illustrates an interesting scenario, maybe one of the first times we've seen this in this class. We're going to distribute the 9 because it's on the outside of the parentheses. So we have 9 times x, which is 9x, and then you have plus, and then you have 9 times 3, which is 27. And the only reason I'm going to show you this problem is I don't want you to be confused. Sometimes you have to just trust your math, trust that you're doing things right. And sometimes we get answers that just look a little weird. And so when you go to subtract the 27, because we do the add and subtract first, 27 take away 27 is 0. And that's okay. And on the left side here, you have 9x. And a lot of times people kind of stop here and get a little confused at what they're looking at. Well, follow the math, finish your steps. You still have to divide by the 9. And you're going to still end up with x equals. And 0 divided by 9, anytime you have a 0 on top, the answer is 0. Now a 0 on the bottom, that would be a different scenario. But a lot of times kids get to this step and then they kind of not really sure what they're looking at. But any 0 divided by any number is going to be 0. So there's our solution. If x is 0, we have an answer. And if I come back here and I try and make sense of that, if I put a 0 in here, 0 plus 3 would be 3. And 9 times 3 would be this 27. So that's why it's going to be our solution. Hey, to further complicate things, sometimes we have to use distributive property and we got to distribute a fraction. Distributing a fraction really isn't that big a deal. Whatever number you see on the bottom, that's the denominator, and that number represents we're going to be dividing. So in this problem, we're going to be dividing by 2. And any number that is on top in the numerator, we would be multiplying by that number. In this case, we're simply going to just be taking a half of everything in the parentheses. So half of 4x and then half of negative 8. So half of 4x, half of 4 is 2. So half of 4x is just 2x. And half, and then minus, and then half of 8 is 4. So that's really all there is to distributing a fraction. When it's something simple like this, we're just dividing by 2. And then let's go ahead and continue the problem. This wasn't in the parentheses, so we don't need to touch it. And equals x plus 11. And we got some like terms. On this left side, we have 2x, and we have another 2x. And we can combine those because they're on the same side of the equal sign. So if there's 2x and 2x, that is going to combine to make 4x minus 4, don't forget that, equals x plus 11. And now we're just down to essentially the first lesson of solving equations, which is variables on both sides. And there's the smaller variable, it's x, this is 4x. So let's go ahead and move this smaller one. We'll take away an x on both sides. And that's going to leave us with 3x minus 4 equals 11. And we'll finish solving the problem, right? Do the add step first. It's just a two-step equation now, 7th grade math. 15 equals, and there's 3x. And we'll divide by 3, and we'll be wrapped up. So give it a go. Fraction's not that big a deal. X is 5 is your solution. I think I'll let you work on this problem on your own, but we can try and talk ourselves through it. Remember, the last problem had a 2 in the denominator. This one has a 3. When you see something down there, that means we're going to be dividing. So you're going to take the two things, the two terms in here, and you're going to divide them by 3. So that 6 is going to be divided by 3, and the 9 is going to get divided by 3. And you can, if 6 divided by 3 is 2, that's going to leave you with a 2x there, and the 9 divided by 3 is going to leave you with a 3 there. So when you distribute the 1/3, that just means you're taking those two terms and dividing by 3. And the rest of this will remain untouched, and then you'll get to your next step will be combine like terms. You'll be combining some x's, and then you'll have an equation with variables on both sides. All right, we're finally looking at example 2, where we're going to solve an equation with fractions and distributive property. This one's a little more involved because we've got a denominator and a numerator, which means we're going to be dividing by 4 and multiplying by 3. The interesting thing in this problem is none of these two terms can be divided by 4, so you can't actually reduce anything. So we are going to have to multiply some things by 3/4. Let's go over to the right side and do this. Side is a little bit simpler. -2 times a 9 is a -18. And then negative 2 times x is a negative 2x. You could put plus a minus 2x. I'm not a big fan of plus a minus, but it's a negative nonetheless, so I'm just going to leave it as negative 2x. And 3/4 times x is, there's really nothing fancy about it. It's just 3/4 x, and we're going to have to manage that denominator in a second. We're going to have to clear some fractions. Minus, because there's a minus sign there, and if I want to multiply 3/4 times 13, we're just going to keep it as a fraction. So let's multiply the top. 3 times 13 is 39 over 4. So I'm going to leave it like that, minus 39 over 4, because I'm going to have to clear the fraction. If I want to look at this in the terms of clearing the fraction, sometimes it's helpful if they all are a fraction. So let's take these two numbers here and just put a 1 underneath them so that it looks like a fraction. And then we're going to clear. So I have denominators of 4, 4, 1, and 1, and the lowest common multiple is just a 4. So we're going to clear the fractions by putting a 4 next to every term. And on the left side, these 4s are just going to cancel out. They're just going to reduce. They're going to turn to 1s. And we're left with 3x minus, and then these 4s are just going to reduce, and you'll have 39. And on this side, we got to multiply because there's nothing to reduce the 1 and the 4, and here we are going to multiply. So 18 times 4 is 72. It's going to be a negative 72. And this is a negative number. Negative, and then a 2 times 4 is going to be a negative 8x. Please don't forget the x. And now we just have an equation that's got variables on both sides. We're going to move the smallest x first. 3x is positive, 8x is negative, so we are going to move the 8x, and we do that by adding. So we're going to go ahead and add 8x to both sides. That's going to give me 11x minus 39 equals negative 72. And now we're going to go ahead and do our adding and subtracting first, which means we're going to have to add 39. Let's move that to the other side. And what we're left with is 11x equals, and if I deal with this correctly, that's a negative number and a positive number, so we got to subtract them. So I'll just come over here and I will do the subtraction because they have different signs. We'll borrow from the 7, and you are going to get a very easily dividable answer. There's a bigger number that's negative, so it's going to be a negative number, negative 33. And when we divide by 11, it goes in there all even and no problems. X equals negative 3, and there is your solution. I wanted to show you how we might go about checking this answer. I'm going to drag my calculator down. Here's what we're going to do. We're simply going to type in this equation on the left side, but we're going to replace x with our answer, which is negative 3. And then we're going to compare it when I put a negative 3 also on the right, and we better get the same total twice if we have a solution. It's got to make this equation true. So let's start with 3/4. So I'll click the A over B button, and then there's a 3 and the 4th. So I'll click out here in the middle so that I can give my parentheses. Otherwise, you'll be putting parentheses in the denominator. Now, in place of x, I'm going to go ahead and put that negative 3. And then I'm going to also type in a negative 13 since that's the rest of that equation. So if you look, this right here says 3/4 parentheses x minus 13, which is exactly what the top of this equation, the left side of this equation looks like. And you see that I get a negative 12 for an answer. If I hit enter, that stays. Now, when I plug a negative 3 into the right side, I need to get a negative 12 for an answer. So let's take a look. I'm going to put negative 2 on the outside of the parentheses. And in parentheses, it's just going to be a 9 plus x. And then you could go a 9 plus, and then x happens to be a negative 3. So I'm just going to type it in like that. I'm not a huge fan of plus a minus, but in this case, it's going to be fine. And you can see that when I close off the parentheses, both sides equal negative 12, which means that when I put a negative 3 in for x, I get a solution that says negative 12 is the same as negative 12, which is a true statement, which is why x equals negative 3 is the solution.